the Jet Setting Wealth Advisory Podcast, where your financial journey takes flight with David T.U. As an airline pilot and financial expert, David merges the aviation industry and wealth management to help you navigate today's complex financial skies. Each episode features expert insight, blending personal stories with essential financial strategies. We ask that you fasten your seatbelts and sit back as we prepare for takeoff. Our destination, your financial empowerment.
Hello, welcome to Jet Setting Wealth Advisory Podcast. I'm your host, David T.U., and today we're thrilled to have Forrest Owens as our guest. Forrest is a board-certified aviation law specialist and the founder of Aviation Legal Counsel. He brings a wealth of expertise and experience in aircraft and aviation-related transactions, cross-border dealings, and airman defense before the FAA and the Department of Transportation. His expertise also extends to airport real estate, land use, and civil litigation, making him a leading figure in navigating the complexities of aviation law. So welcome, and thank you for joining us today, Owen.
David, thank you very much for
Mr.
having
Owens, I should say Mr. Owens.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Great.
Welcome the opportunity.
So let me just give a little bit of background about yourself. Mr. Forrest Owens spent his formative years in Indiana. Mr. Owens attended Benson's University, where he focused his studies on aviation technology and obtained a FAA administration airframe and power plant mechanic license, as well as a private pilot license. Graduating with a aviation science degree in 1998, Mr. Owens also subsequently attended the Indiana University Kelley School of Business, where he majored in finance with a minor in economics, completing a Bachelor of Science in 2001. During the course of undergraduate studies, Mr. Owens also worked full-time for a leading aircraft turbine engine manufacturer based in Indianapolis, as well as a regional airline and an internationally recognized aviation center freight company. Mr. Owens attended law school at the Valparaiso University, where he graduated with a JD in 2005. Mr. Owens earned his board certification in aviation law, making him an expert in aviation law. Mr. Owens also formed an Aviation Legal Counsel in 2017, concentrating on aircraft and aviation-related transactions, cross-border transactions, and airmen's defense before the FAA and the Department of Transportation. So, with that background, let's get to know you some more with some questions. What prompted you to start Aviation Legal Counsel, your firm, and how does your firm address the unique challenges that are faced by professionals in the aviation industry?
Well, what prompted me to form or start the firm was really business motivated. One of the driving factors to pursue legal education or become a lawyer was the opportunity to be a business owner without significant capital. And I saw the law as a way to pursue that. So that was one of the driving factors. It took a little while to get to that launching point. I started focusing on aviation-related legal matters in around 2006. And so I was a good 11 years or so into the practice, and then decided that I wanted to pursue my own business and to seek to assist folks with aviation-related legal matters, which can be pretty diverse. If you want to think what is aviation law, it's really corporate law or business law with a regulatory component from the FAA. And there's a lot of different factors for aviation law. You've got IRS considerations, FAA considerations, state considerations. It takes a bit of time to become efficient drawing all those things together. My goal is to help clients navigate difficult circumstances and get where they want to go. Just like a pilot takes their passengers from one place to another, I view my role as a navigator, helping clients navigate some areas that are complicated, nuanced, help them get from where they've started to where they want to go as efficiently and effectively as possible.
Absolutely. So, can you share how your earlier experiences working for a leading aircraft turbine engine manufacturer and a regional airline influenced your decision to really start your own business, or how that has affected you to participate in specializing in aviation law?
Oh, certainly. I think if we even take a little bit step back further, if we look at when you mentioned Vincent's University or going for an airframe and power plant mechanics certificate, that's where I got the idea that aviation law was a thing, or that it was an actual area to focus on. Because during the course of studies for an A&P license, you do study the federal aviation regulations. And during my studies, I smile a bit because, a lot of my classmates, they want to be aircraft mechanics, and the federal aviation regulations, they did not like that class. They did not enjoy it. But I was sitting there thinking, well, this is a lot of fun. This is actually really interesting. And so that's where the interest started. And as time has gone along, there's a saying that when the weight of the paper equals the weight of the plane, then it's ready to fly. And
Sure.
that's pretty true. So as you go along, you find out that there's as much or more paperwork involved with aircraft as with anything physical. So, going on to ask about how working for a turbine engine manufacturer, I worked in their contracts department. So I was exposed to a number of interesting things that I've continued to develop my interest in aviation law. A lot of the things that I did at the time were associated with government contracts and government deliverables, meaning
Mm.
the government has certain criteria for an engineering project that they would track and follow. And it was basically my job at the time to keep up with that and nudge the engineers associated with where they were with regards to the deliverables that they had to the US government a lot of times.
Okay. Oh, very good. Forrest, share with us and walk us through the process of a high stake aircraft transaction and what makes these deals particularly challenging or rewarding.
Well, purchasing an aircraft is a lot like buying any other asset, and any other asset that's high value and potentially complicated to transact. Now, most folks have at some point in time may have bought a home, probably certainly have bought a car,
Sure.
and many of the same processes apply to the purchase of an aircraft. So, particularly with a used or pre-owned aircraft, people look or scour the market. They try to determine use. One of the challenges associated with aircraft transactions is maintenance and
Absolutely.
review of the maintenance. So probably the nitty gritty of what makes aircraft transactions unique or more difficult than others would primarily be maintenance and maintenance review. And so it's customary or recommended that an aircraft that's acquired go through a pre-purchase inspection. And it's customary for an aircraft to go through a pre-purchase inspection, and then for a purchaser to have the ability to accept or reject the aircraft based on the findings associated with maintenance, and then proceed. But understanding the maintenance of it, history of an aircraft, what the implications are, is pretty unique. You'll have issues like corrosion. You'll have issues associated with a history of major repair. Now, the major repair, it may not affect the airworthiness of the aircraft today, but it could have an effect on the value of an aircraft. So by analogy, if you buy a used car and if it's been in an accident before, the extent of that accident may not have done much damage to the car at all. It might just have been a fender bender, or
Sure.
maybe it was, totally destroyed and totally rebuilt. You don't know those things until you get into it. And those issues make aircraft transactions particularly unique. The other thing that comes up with turbine powered aircraft is a lot of them are enrolled in what are called maintenance programs. Programs are essentially a way to budget for maintenance cost. So an owner will pay based on the hour and based on the month, a monthly cost that will keep their coverage current for maintenance. It's like maintenance insurance or an extended warranty. ensuring that those programs are current without a deficiency balance and that they're transferable is something that needs specific and special attention in aircraft transactions, especially if the seller is financially distressed. A lot of times those maintenance programs will have not been paid and the ability to re-enroll them may be in question. So those things need to be looked at very carefully. The other issue that comes up on turbine aircraft is syncing maintenance schedules. And
Mm,
this is something that owners don't think about very often because with turbine aircraft, there's maintenance that's calendar driven, meaning it may have to be done every year, or it may be cycle driven, meaning it has to be done every so many landings, takeoff and landings, every so many cycles. And the problems that come up if you don't have a synced maintenance schedule is that you may perform all the maintenance that you need to do today, and then you'll go fly for a week or two, and then more maintenance will come due, and you have to take it right back out of the air and start working on it again. I don't believe it's as much of a problem with commercial airlines because their maintenance schedules are pretty synced or tight.
mhm.
But with private aircraft, the amount that they fly varies, the number of landings that occur vary. So those things need to be carefully considered because the last thing you want to do is go through significant maintenance, close on an aircraft, start to conduct your trips, and then have to take it out of service shortly thereafter. So
That
that's
would be
another
terrible. Yeah.
that's another thing. So those are the two things that think of with turbine aircraft. With smaller aircraft like smaller four-seaters, piston aircraft, I chuckle because the level of formality that many buyers and sellers of small aircraft uh, pursue
Sure.
is um, shocking as to how informal they are
Wow.
and how uncareful they can be. And I say that because, if a lot of times aircraft are sold between people that know each other.
Sure.
Sometimes they're sold to people that know each other as often as people that don't know each other. But what I often see is and I get these calls after the fact, after a closing has occurred,
Mhm.
but I bought this aircraft from a friend of mine. He said it was good. He said all the maintenance was up to date. And now that I've taken it to a shop and had it looked at for its annual inspection, there's all these different things that have arisen and all these problems. I want to file an action against him because he sold me a bad plane, in
Mhm.
essence. And those things arise, but the truth of the matter is they shouldn't really have been. You should know what you're getting into. And
Absolutely.
an aircraft, you can buy the lower the value of the aircraft, really the more attentive you need to be with regards to its maintenance schedule, because the more likely it is that maintenance wasn't performed. Um, so, but you'll see aircraft that transact for $500,000 to $1 million in that piston space. And sometimes there's still that level of informality. And that's always shocking to me when folks spend $500,000 and don't dot their I's and cross their T's.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the maintenance that's involved in keeping the airplane operating it as well as pre-purchase inspections. Being that you have an AMP license, that's airframe and power plant mechanic license, do you help facilitate that maintenance, pre-purchase maintenance inspection, being that you have the licenses to do that, or do you?
I don't actually. Most of the time, so I don't perform. I myself in the role of an attorney, I don't perform I don't perform pre-purchase inspections.
Okay.
But what I do often do is speak with maintenance facilities that have conducted the inspections,
Mhm.
as well as the technical advisors that may be representing a purchaser. So
Sure.
uh, that gives a good opportunity to mention something that aircraft purchasers should consider is you should have a technical representative that can look at the aircraft with knowledge in your interest or specifically with your interest in mind, because every maintenance facility that aircraft is taken to for a pre-buy inspection may have a different opinion. So it's not uncommon for an aircraft to come out of an inspection, go to another maintenance facility, another inspection facility, and for different things to be found. It's like a second opinion, and the second opinion almost always yields something. So, I'd strongly recommend folks have a technical representative, technical advisor. But back to your point of question towards me is what's my role, or how is it helpful? It's helpful for me because I understand the language of what's being said. I understand the discrepancies that have arisen, where they're coming from. Corrosion, corrosion like rust or corrosion in any circumstance is always problematic. But for aircraft, it's really a difficult and gray area, because every aircraft that's flown any amount of time has a little bit of corrosion somewhere.
Absolutely. Sure.
But where is that corrosion located, and is it detrimental? I was involved in an aircraft transaction some years ago where the lavatory had leaked into the belly of the aircraft. That blue juice that's in the toilet created significant corrosion in the belly of the aircraft. Structural damage, structural issues that came up during the inspection. That was a high six-figure to low seven-figure problem to remedy, and it affected the value of the aircraft going forward for subsequent sales. So,
absolutely,
these issues come up frequently, and you just have to be wary of those. Aircraft owners, aircraft sellers, and purchasers particularly should be very concerned about.
Well, you particularly being in a legal professional, aviation legal expert, and having the technical knowledge as an airframe and power plant FAA certified mechanic license, certainly you can get into the weeds of these particular technology and the mechanics of the aircrafts.
It certainly helps. I cannot say it does not help. It helps a lot. And most of the time, the issues that come up with an aircraft purchase or litigation comes up, and there's a fair amount of civil litigation that comes along with this practice.
Yes.
But where do those issues arise from? I call it the 3 M's. They arise from maintenance, management, and misrepresentation. Maintenance is a huge driver of subsequent litigation. Management of aircraft, who's overseeing your aircraft, that's also an area of dispute. And then, just like with any industry or in any business circumstance, there's going to be a fair amount of misrepresentation that occurs, because not everyone out there is truthful.
Absolutely.
It's just the way the world is. So
it is what it is. Yes.
It is what it is. So you're going to have those things arise all the time. But those 3 M's are the driver of essentially almost all the civil litigation I see.
The 3 M's are very, very important to remember for our viewers as well as our listeners. Switching off the tracks on this type of a conversation, let's talk a little bit about wealth building in aviation. What are some of the effective strategies for wealth building within the aviation sector, especially considering the high cost and the risks associated with aircraft ownership and operations?
You're going to get me to chuckle on that question, because there's these different sayings there's truisms that float around in any industry. And one of the truisms in aviation is, how do you make a small fortune in aviation? You start
by having a big fortune.
Yes. What I would say is that as far as wealth building or actual money to be made, there's money to be made in the aviation industry and in all the ancillary services that are associated with aviation. So maintenance is an area that money can be made. Management may be an area that money can be made. Aircraft brokerage is an area that money can be made. Legal services are an area that money can be made. The actual ownership and operation of aircraft is rarely a money-making endeavor for an owner.
And worth taking. The point
it's almost never the owner that makes money. It's always a cost. It's always a cost reduction strategy.
Okay.
And if one of the probably for somebody getting into the industry or looking to acquire an aircraft, one of the polygraphs for the industry is who's telling you you're going to make money doing this?
Sure.
And is telling you that you're going to make money doing this, and they present you with financials and a spreadsheet that says you're going to make money, you're probably not. There's something buried in there there's something that's not being told to you. There's a variable that they haven't given you that you're not going to make money.
Okay.
So, I mean, you might get lucky. There are always, there's always but how often do you, maybe by way of analogy that's relatable to most of us is how often do you go to an auto dealership, buy a car brand new off the lot, drive it off the lot, and then turn around and sell it for more a year or two later?
Very
It's
rarely. Yeah.
very rarely. It just doesn't.
Very, very rarely.
Very rarely. So
Mhm.
there are anomalies that you make money, but it's not the norm.
I see.
And and we've seen, at least in the private aviation industry in the past few years, really kind of some non-traditional economics.
Okay.
So from if you go back to 2000, if you talk about two different time periods, if you look at 2007, 2008, there was a ramp up of valuation for aircraft. You could buy an aircraft
Yes.
itself, and you could buy and sell it for about what you paid for it, or even make money, prior to
Yes.
that. Then when the financial crisis hit of 2008, then values dipped significantly, and they started to act more like traditional assets. If you go now to what's happened in the past couple years, it's been it hasn't been really it's rational, but it's not really logical, or it's not where you would expected things to be.
Mhm.
Because when things shut down in 2020 for the pandemic, there was a couple months where things froze up and transactions ceased and there wasn't much activity. And then once things picked back up, there were valuations increased and doubled in some circumstances. There was a significant appetite for aircraft and for aircraft operations, and I think it can be attributed to a couple of different things. One thing is it introduced a lot of people to private aviation that otherwise wouldn't have flown privately, but had the means to do so, meaning they could afford to fly privately, but for one reason or another, they didn't.
They haven't. Yeah.
They didn't. And then when the pandemic hit, they started to fly privately out of either necessity and or because it made sense. The only way they could get some places to fly privately, the only way they could fly without contacting someone else was to fly privately. So that happened. And the other thing I think that happened from just a human nature perspective, and this kind of came along with a dialogue that I had with a client during that period of time. We're on a conference call, and it's the C-suite of this organization, and the CFO is, doing what a CFO should do, saying, "This doesn't make financial sense. This doesn't make financial sense." And the principal owner of the business is kind of like, "I don't care. I've worked hard. I can afford it, and I'm going to do it." And I think that live today mentality that kind of came along or became with the pandemic became more common.
Sure. You
Really,
only live once.
yeah, you only live once, and there's nothing stopping me, even though it may not make
Financial
perfect
sense.
rational sense
Yeah.
at the end of the day. I want to do it, and I'm going to do it. So that attitude kind of kicked in pretty significantly as well. Because if you look at the demographics or the cohort of people that buy private aircraft and own them, it's successfully own them. It's usually a business owner. It's
Sure.
usually it's a large, small company business owner the company's privately owned. They do well. They have 100 plus employees. They've got significant annual revenue. They can afford it. It might be. It's not going to ever be. It's never going to make. It's never going to make
money
your
maker.
accountant.
Right.
It's never going to make your accountant or your financial advisor absolutely happy. But neither is the Ferrari in your garage. So
Sure.
it just depends on It depends on what's important and what your priorities are. But once you get a taste for private aviation, private flying, it's it's almost impossible to give up
Sure,
because just like to relate to more common thought processes is in America, most of us, not all of us, but most of us own our own cars. Most of
sure,
us, most families have, they have a car, and in many cases, two or more cars.
sure.
And how many folks would be comfortable without their car? Very few. And with a private aircraft, once it makes its way into your once it makes into your way of your portfolio of your transportation portfolio, it's really difficult to get it out of there because it is so convenient, and the time savings is so significant that it does become justified.
You basically become spoiled, and the efficiency of time, and even potentially with some tax laws changed a few years ago, back in 2018, where you're able to take some bonus depreciation and accelerated depreciation nature of specifically regarding to aircrafts. Can you share with us some tax considerations should an individual or business owner or businesses should be aware of in terms of effective tax planning and minimizing their tax liabilities with aircraft ownership?
Certainly. Well, the what you mentioned was the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act that enabled 100% bonus depreciation for aircraft operated predominantly in business. So going back to that cost mitigation or cost reduction strategy, it's kind of it's a pretty strong incentive for someone that has significant taxable income to be able to buy an aircraft, depreciate it, and then reduce their taxable income significantly. So it's pretty common for corporate aircraft owners to buy them and then depreciate them or seek to depreciate them. So there's that federal tax aspect. The thing that needs to be kept in mind is it has to be used in the furtherance of business. So for someone that buys a corporate aircraft, if they have multiple factories that they need to go to or multiple business locations that they need to go to quickly, it's an extremely helpful tool. And you'll have a straight-faced argument to depreciate it. But one of the things to keep in mind, or raise this with your tax advisor from the start, is do you have enough? Is your depreciation active or passive? And what bucket does your income fall in? Because that comes up frequently with people looking to acquire aircraft. Is their income generated in active trade or business, or is it investment income like passive income? And unfortunately, a lot of times when you buy aircraft, the depreciation can be per se passive. So you need passive income to offset. You need passive income to write that off against.
Sure.
And so it's important to see if the flavor of your income and the flavor of your depreciation sync. Because if they don't, then your goals might be frustrated there. The other tax consideration that needs to be mentioned that's almost equally as important as the federal tax consideration is state tax.
Sure.
So not a state, but state, like the state of Florida, the state of Illinois, the state of Indiana, etc. So when you're looking at acquiring an aircraft using, say, $10 million as an example, if you look at a $10 million aircraft, the sales tax on that aircraft, because it's considered a piece of tangible personal property, could be around $600,000 or more. So that's not insignificant.
No,
So
certainly isn't.
it's significant. So a lot of times, many aircraft owners will seek to mitigate tax on the purchase of an aircraft via some mitigation.
Okay.
So, and that mitigation is often through sale for resale, meaning they buy it and then release it and then pay use tax. They close on the aircraft in a tax-free state that doesn't have any type of sales tax.
Sure.
They turn the aircraft over to a commercial operator that then pays them rents and use tax on the rents. So the state tax considerations are with every aircraft, but those are also unique because we have 48 lower states and there are 48 different state taxing authorities and
Sure.
48 different regimes. So in some states it's very favorable, in others it's not. It just depends. So, but but there's very few states where there isn't some opportunity to mitigate tax on the purchase price and pay tax
Okay.
over time versus lump sum.
It sounds extremely interesting, and it's a very certainly incentivizes successful business owners with a lot of income and potentially a lot of cash flow to consider acquisitioning of an airplane for the purpose of furthering their business endeavors. In terms of trends and legal trends, what are some of the emerging legal trends in the aviation industry that you think will have significant implications for your clients in the next few years?
See, or what I see is a lot of movement away from what are called flight department companies, or not
Oh,
flight departments.
mhm.
So you don't see as often as I used to, say 10 or 15 years ago. It was pretty common for a company to have a flight department, or they would have a corporate aviation wing. So
Yeah,
you'd have a chief pilot, you'd have a mechanic, you'd have these personnel that were assigned to the aircraft. Now, what I see a lot more of is aircraft that are placed in management with management companies.
mm,
So you have a management company, they may have a charter certificate as well, but the aircraft will be placed with a management company and managed by the management company. And I think that's driven by a number of different things, but um, it's basically a consolidation of expertise, and it's also it's becoming harder and harder to crew aircraft, meaning to get pilots for aircraft, due to just the inherent pilot shortage that exists in the industry. So, in order to address that, you'll see a lot of management and charter companies oversee aircraft on behalf of client owners.
I
The other
see.
thing, the other thing that I see a
Mm,
trend towards is a gravitation towards fractional ownership, or
okay,
ownership within a fractional program, because many clients have a need for private travel, but they may not have the appetite for 200 to 400 hours a year of private flying,
utilization, yeah, of
of
their own
utilization.
airplanes. Mhm.
Right, which is really about the ballpark of what's need. That type of utilization is what's needed to own a whole aircraft, is about 200 to 400 hours a year. Um, it doesn't have to be that, but that's really what makes the math start to work. Is
Yeah,
something that
justification
right?
for
Yeah,
supporting your own wholly owned aircraft. Uh,
correct. But
you don't
if
use it very much. Yeah, it doesn't. The numbers don't
it
work.
doesn't, and with aircraft, lack of use is absolute abuse. It's absolutely abusive to not have an aircraft flying, because they need to be maintained, they need to be exercised, and if they're regularly flown and maintained, uh, then you'll have less costly problems overall. They need to be, they can't sit dormant.
Sure.
They don't do well sitting dormant in a hangar. But going back to the point, I see a lot of gravitation towards consolidation and fractional arrangements, as well as shared ownership arrangements. So uh,
Makes
you know,
sense. Mhm.
so a lot of times you'll see people going to fractional. The other thing I see a lot of is what are called co-ownership, where, say, you and I want to go buy an aircraft, we buy it together,
Sure.
and then address the legal concerns associated with that. Last year in the fourth quarter, I had to chuckle because somehow, I was motoring along, I was dealing with a number of deals, and every single one of them for a while was, "Hey, we're gonna buy a plane. We're gonna work this out well in advance."
Mhm.
Great. I'm thinking to myself, "Wow, that's awesome. Makes my life easier."
Sure.
And then 2 or 3 weeks into the deal, oh, by the way, I'm gonna bring my friend in.
Oh.
And
Mhm.
and what does that do? Well, that doubles the complexity and really doubles the work, because then you have two owners buying an aircraft,
Right.
and then you have the arrangement between the two of them that has to be navigated, and every single one of those arrangements is unique to the parties as well. So
Sure.
So it's but consolidation. I can't anticipate that we're not going to see anything but consolidation of operation and ownership going forward.
Okay. So without breaching confidentiality, could you share an anecdote about a particular challenge or memorable case that you've handled?
I know that they're all memorable, and the ones that they can all be memorable. I'm just trying to grasp on what might be the
Okay.
it's the ones that are problematic are always the ones that are most
Yes. Share with us if you can,
yeah.
if you like.
Story I can tell is that so I had a client that bought an aircraft, and there was an aircraft manager involved who also was a pilot.
Okay.
And what happens is pilots and owners often develop, they naturally develop a
A
relationship,
relationship. Sure.
or I would call it a relationship of trust, because
Mhm.
you're flying with me, you're taking me where I want to go, and I've obviously arrived safely along with you. So there's
Sure.
just kind of this inherent, trust that goes along with that.
Innate. Yep.
So in this particular circumstance, the pilot, did some aircraft management, um, and then and assisted with reviewing the aircraft prior to purchase. You know,
Okay.
so and there were specifications on the aircraft that included Wi-Fi,
Okay.
or Wi-Fi, like wireless, for
Yep.
wireless internet connectivity. So, after closing, the broker slash pilot wasn't able to make a trip, and the crew that crewed this aircraft formerly, like before for the prior owner, stepped in as contract crew to fly the new owner.
Okay.
Well, the new owner is like, I can't wait. This aircraft's going in for Wi-Fi in a week or so, and I can't wait. When I finally get Wi-Fi back on this plane, or when I get Wi-Fi installed on the plane. And the crew that flew for the former owner said, what are you talking about?" They pulled back the panel, little Velcro, and it's like, there's the router. It's got
Wow.
Wi-Fi.
Okay.
So, so, so what had this pilot done? What he'd done is he had requested a quote for Wi-Fi installation. He had gotten the money from the owner
Oh
for
no.
Wi-Fi installation, and the aircraft already had Wi-Fi.
Fine.
So all that needed to be done was essentially to turn it on, or re-up the subscription
Yeah.
for the Wi-Fi.
Activate it. Mhm.
Right. So basically the pilot was pocketing a little over six figures
Oh wow.
because for this Wi-Fi installation that essentially had already occurred.
And we're
So
talking about private pilot, right? We're not talking about professional, say, an
we're talking
airline
about a
pilot.
professional pilot, a commercial
Okay.
pilot. We're talking
Okay.
about not an airline pilot, but a
Okay.
a pilot that flies corporate aircraft.
Professionally and
Yeah, regularly.
manages the airplanes.
Yeah, and
Okay.
manages the aircraft. He, basically misrepresented, and went out and got a legitimate quote for installation Wi-Fi, but there was already
No need
Wi-Fi
for it.
for the aircraft. Right. It would
Wow.
basically be like saying, hey, do you need
Yeah.
whatever you need? It's
Yeah.
whatever you
It's
need.
already
Send me
there.
it's already there. You just have to flip the switch.
Wow.
So that
So what
was
happened with that? So what happened with that particular case?
that individual was sued. Judgment was obtained for
Okay.
the malfeasance, or
Okay.
the wrongdoing there, and the essentially embezzlement of
Sure.
funds.
Wow.
So, and
Oh, wow.
so there, wow is
Okay.
right. That's probably that's probably one of the grossest examples of mismanagement or misrepresentation I can think of. But these things happen.
Sure.
I'm not saying that these things happen on occasion, and
Sure.
just need to be aware of it. So, just be careful. Is
Understand.
be careful. Be aware of what's for an individual going into or buying an aircraft. They need to be aware, and they need somebody in their corner to look out for them as much as you can.
Absolutely. So, speaking of that, advice for aspiring aviation lawyers. What would you give in terms of advice to young attorneys who are interested in entering this field of law, aviation law?
Well, that's a good question, and I think that probably one of the best things they could do is to to pursue some aspect of familiarity with the industry,
Okay.
meaning pursue a pilot's license or pursue some knowledge of the industry other than just the law degree, because
Okay.
legal education is helpful, but it's not. But you really need to know the industry and know the industry language in order to do well and navigate it.
Sure.
So, I had an inquiry from a young man or young attorney that was finishing up school and he wanted to become an aviation attorney. And I kind of tested him and said, "Hey, do you like, would you ever have any interest in getting a pilot's license?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, go get one. Go get one on your own. Show that initiative, and you'll at least have shown that at least you'll learn the language. You've already paid for school.
Sure.
You already paid for law school, but you really need to show some additional initiative in order to get there."
To get
And
into this niche space.
yeah, and it
In this
doesn't mean
industry.
that it doesn't mean that you can't pick it up. It doesn't mean you can't pick it up on the job. And a lot of people do. There's a lot of attorneys in the industry that got an in working for a major carrier or a OEM or
Mhm.
uh, a manufacturer or a charter provider. They had some in where they kind of learned how the business works and the language of it.
Understand. And finally, where can our listeners and viewers, how do they reach you?
Well, the best way to reach me is by email, and
Okay.
that's Forrest Forrest at aviationlegalcounsel.com.
Okay.
So the aviationlegalcounsel.com. And the other way to reach me, 888-6-FLY, FLYLAW, or 888-635-9529.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So, with that in mind, I want to thank you for those that are joining us on this episode of the Jet Setting Wealth Advisory Podcast. We're immensely grateful for Forrest Owens for sharing his expertise, experience, and insight into the aviation law and the intricacies of aircraft transactions. If you're interested in learning more about Forrest Service and how Aviation Legal Counsel can assist you with your aviation-related legal needs, do visit his website, which is Forrest.
www.aviationlegalcounsel.com.
Very good. We appreciate your support. We look forward to having you with us on our next episode. I'm David Yu, airline pilot, founder, and wealth advisor of DTY Wealth Planning Solutions. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, keep your financial goals in focus and your strategies sharp. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for flying with us on today's episode of Jet Setting Wealth Advisory. If you enjoyed your journey through the fiscal skies with David T. Yu, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and keep your financial knowledge soaring. For more insights and personalized advice, visit us at www.dtywealthplanningsolutions.com and connect with David directly